What's up, guys? Welcome back to episode number 3 on getting started with the DJ basics using a controller like the Hercules Impulse 300. Now, I do want to again say thank you to the fine folks over at Hercules for sponsoring this series and for providing this controller, allowing me to make some dope content for you guys here on YouTube. So we're going to get started today with using our EQs or equalizers to transition from song to song in your mix. We have talked about setting up your cue points for success. The last episode we talked about beat for beat matching, and today we're going to be talking about using your EQs to blend one song into another. Now, if you're just getting started, you probably don't even know what an EQ or equalizer is. Simply put, there are 3 basic steps in an EQ. One is the high, one is the low, and one is the mid, or high, mid, and low. That is taking out or giving to the bands in that specific range. On a controller like the Hercules Impulse 300, we also have a high pass and low pass filter, as well as an overall gain knob which adjusts the overall volume. So we can add or take away from the high, add or take away from the mid, add or take away from the low, and then we can sweep the mids and the highs using the high pass or low pass filter. Now, you may be wondering why this is even important. I thought we're just DJing, we're just beat matching and switching from song to song. You know, that's perfectly okay if that's something that you want to do, but if you want to transition and blend your songs well, you need to know the basics on how to do it using your equalizer, because sometimes when you're bringing in 2 tracks at the same time, you can overload your mix and make it just sound generally muddy. So whenever I bring in a track, I always drop a little low or drop a little mid to make the song sound like one good song instead of 2 individual songs kind of fighting against each other. Even if you have the beats properly aligned, unless you go through and make some adjustments, it still may sound a little muddy. So instead of me talking about it, let's actually dive in and show you what I'm talking about. So now that we know what an EQ is, let's listen to how it affects the overall mix of the song. So let's take a listen to deck number 1. And then we're just gonna slightly, make slight adjustments using our EQ. You hear how the high pass cut out of it? Or you can boost it. The same goes with mid. Really takes away the depth and kind of the soul of the entire song, or we can boost it as well. And the low. Let's take it back to Q1 where that bass drum is. You hear the adjustments? Now, the high pass and low pass filter is something that you can use as a transition piece, really give some interesting vibes to your mix overall. We'll listen to what that sounds like. Now, the one thing to note about the high pass and low pass filters, if you drop that low pass all the way down, you notice it completely goes away, because we can't, as humans, we can't really hear anything below the spectrum that it goes, so it cuts it out completely. And then up here at the high, we can kind of, at the top end of it, you can somewhat hear a little bit of it, but again, it cuts the whole thing out. Now, the high pass and low pass filters are, they are affecting specific bands within the EQ. That's why you kind of hear that sound being affected, where you don't hear something like that just dropping out the EQs. Now, these aren't total loss EQs, so when you turn them all the way down, they're not going to go completely away. There are other controllers that are total loss EQs. That way, when you turn them all the way down, it cuts it out completely. So when all these are set to 0, you hear nothing as you would with the filter. Alright, so as you can see, I have two songs queued up right now. One is 128 BPM, the other is 120. So let's make some small adjustments. We're going to move one down to 124, or close enough to it, and we're going to move this one up to 124 as well, or like I said, close enough to it. Now let's simply play deck number 1. Let's add in deck number 2. Now at home that may sound totally fine to you, but when those low notes or that bass drum or kick drum is hitting, chances are you're going to be overriding your EQs. It's just going to sound really muddy. So what we like to do is decrease some of that low. That way you're getting the low pass from the deck number 2 and none of it in deck number 1, just creating a little bit cleaner mix. So now we have established what EQs are, what they do, and how they can affect a song. Let's use those same EQs to make a good transition from one track to another. As you can see, we can't even hear what's going on deck number 1. We're going to switch over to deck number 2. And we have successfully transitioned one track into the next. Now let's go ahead and bring in another track and we'll do it again. As you can see, I'm resetting my EQs. Drop the low out. Now let's transition using the low pass filter. Now, what we can always do is bring this right back to the center, put our EQs back at normal, slowly start to bring things back in. Let's drop deck 1 back out. There we go. We have successfully transitioned from one track to another and back to the track, all using the EQs and making, one seamless mix going back and forth between the two, simply just using what is right here in front of us. No effects, no extras, just the EQs and the high pass filters built into the controller. Now, I will say that you always want to use the filters with sparingly. Let's just say that is the salt and the pepper on the steak. It's not actually the meat of the mix, so it's not something that you want to always rely on. Use your EQs to get a solid mix between the two tracks, and then you can use the filters to kind of blend and add some flavor and spice to your mix. So that is the basics on how to use your EQs when transitioning from one track to the next. This has been part 3 in our series on the Hercules Impulse DJ controller for getting started with DJing. On part number 4, we're going to talk about using effects and loops to transition the same songs. Now, we've set up our cue points, we've talked about beat matching, we've used our EQ to make a good mix, and next week we're going to tie everything together using our effects and our loops. So be sure to subscribe to the channel, also ring the notification bell, that way you can be notified whenever the new series comes up. If you have any questions, be sure to email me djwoopig@gmail.com, or you can follow me on all my social media platforms. Once again, thank you to the fine folks over at Hercules. We'll see you on episode number 4.